So Vivek has said there is no subject, which is good and wonderful in one sense, because there is only one subject and none other. There is only one reality, and there are countless ways we can approach it. That's the ancient teaching of the great Vedas and Upanishads. But the problem arises that though we say that there is one reality and there are many ways of approaching it, we have been still categorizing the ways into traditional systems of this path and that path. But this is not what is meant by approaching in countless ways. It means that we should live in an age, and I think we are indeed living in an age, where we can approach this reality in everyday event and circumstance of our lives. And if we cannot do it, that means we have missed something in the great teachings. Much before these different paths of yogas came into existence, and we had the great Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which codified the whole free and flexible movement toward the infinite. What did we have? We had seekers who were seekers after truth, after bliss, after beauty, after the love that sustains this creation. And I think that is the common ground at which all of us meet as human beings. And it is the common substrate of our humanity. I think if one has to define humanity, there are so many ways of defining it, and if you look at it biologically and rationally and etc., etc. But the common ground of all humanity is that there is a constant seeking. And I have a feeling if this seeking is not there, then something is missing in our lives. We are not really qualified as being humans. And the beauty of this seeking, of course, initially it takes the form of questions, but behind the questions there is a quest. And this seeking, as I said, the moment it is satisfied with any system, any theory, any set of beliefs, any set of ideas, opinions, viewpoints, then we become encrusted over, fossilized, fit for a museum specimen, and nothing more. And when we have the seeking alive, then we are forever young. That defines our humanity, if I may say so. Why does it define it? Because the problems and the challenges and the questions that we face at a level of existence, actually in reality they are meant as a spur to make us go beyond. That's why there are. Animals face their own issues. They don't use questions, but they have their own issue. And they find their own solutions at their own levels. But actually the solution lies in taking a step beyond that frame. That's why these questions, these stirrings, these seekings are there. And it's a sad day for any of us when we feel that we know and we have everything out here in the head in the form of a jumble, and life is too happy, too satisfied, and too satisfied to aspire anything further. So this constant state of aspiration, this is something very beautiful I find in Mother and Sri Aurobindo. One of the many things, is they don't stop with one experience, one realization. I can't imagine, Sri Aurobindo with 1909, he had all the possible great yogic realizations that one can imagine. He had the experience of nirvana, the experience of Advaita, the infinite, the experience of the great world mother, and the experience of Vasudevam Sarvamiti Samahatma Cha Durlabha. So all that was necessary for him after that was to become a teacher or a master and go around, spread the word. But Sri Aurobindo withdraws into something still greater, still greater. And if I look through the movement, their journey, Mother and Sri Aurobindo, what's awe-inspiring is that even after every possible experience and realizations, they are going still further. There is one of the, some people say Sri Aurobindo writes very long sentences, but actually he has written some very powerful, power-packed, very small sentences. Like one of them in the Life Divine is, and yet there is a beyond. Now, it opens doors and vistas of realizations. This is what I also find in the rishis of the Vedas and the Upanishads. They were not stuck. We have now turned it into schools of philosophies. This is Vedanta. This is a school of philosophy. And then, we have preachings and teachings. But they were seekers above all. And this is the main thing that I find among the many things very, very beautiful, that look at the Divine Mother. Even at in her 90s, she is still aspiring at the most cellular level, at the atomic level, that how this can experience the divine, how this can taste, how the body cells can taste the sweet honey streams of paradise, which one finds in inner states of consciousness. So when we, and these are events, these are things which are taking place within, which are going to impact, in years and decades and centuries to come. Because I remember one of these subjects, I don't know whether I saw it rightly or wrongly, but I had a flash that probably you wrote somewhere current events, and that made me smile. Yeah, you sent a mail about current events, and the two current events that came to my mind was, which were happening on 21st June. One was the International Yoga Day, which I think is a landmark event, all said and done, especially because it, maybe some people are aware and some are not. The significance of 21st June. Why 21st June? It came spontaneously, but there is something very interesting about 21st June with relation to Mother and Shiva Bindu. Yes? The Arya was conceived on 21st June. Yes, it is there. It's documented. So it was not just a casual meeting of dates. So 21st June, but look, today we have the International Yoga Day. Now, when did this whole thing when was it foreseen? When we talk about current events. 100 years back, more than that, if you read the very first page of Synthesis, Sri Aurobindo says that Indian yoga is one of those, not everything, but one of those things which are going to, which is stepping out of the caves to be given to the world at large in the sum total of human utilities. So it's stepping out of the caves. Now I can't conceive when was this happening in 1914, 1915, but today we can literally say that it has stepped out of the caves. It has stepped out of its ashramas and it is spreading into the world. So when we speak about an event, we normally speak about something which is happening today, and we may say that International Yoga Day started on this very day. But we can equally say with a greater and deeper truth that the International Yoga Day, its foundation was laid when Sri Aurobindo conceived of Indian yoga stepping out into the sum total of human activities which are useful to humanity. And this is very important. This is very relevant to all of us. I'll come to that just a little later. For example, Sri Aurobindo gives another example of French Revolution. And he says a mystic sitting in the mountain tops dreamed of freedom. And, much later we had the French Revolution, in which people fought wars for freedom, fought war for equality and fraternity, because somebody sitting on the mountain tops dreamed that such a state is possible. The reason why we need to understand is that we have two choices. One is to become a helpless victim of events and circumstances which are projected on the TV, and we say, oh, this has happened. Oh my God, this has happened. Oh, why did this happen? And then we, discuss, we lament, or we are happy and we forget about it. International Yoga Day, great thing, and we feel very joyous inside. Or some other thing takes place and we are very unhappy about it. And that's being a helpless victim to circumstances and events. And to talk about events in that light is meaningless. It's like, okay, this has happened, how do we deal with it? But what we don't realize that we have our own role to play in the creation of events. And that's how I look at it, that one is the very surface where we see the events and circumstances. And these events and circumstances on the surface, they are, Sri Aurobindo says, they are the result of subliminal quiverings. A very interesting word. Savitri has used the word subliminal quiverings. What is going on inside? Sometimes like a whisper which we don't hear, sometimes like a little hope, sometimes like a state of despair. It could be, either ways. And these quiverings are the material we offer to the world master for doing what he wants to do with it. So people who say that it is fated, well, we are the one who offered the material. And then, yes, it becomes fated in the sense this is the material. It's like if we go to a tailor master and say, please make a dress out of it, and we offer a very crude stuff. What is he going to do? He will make a dress, but it may be coarse. It won't last long, and then we can't blame him because this is the material we offered. So behind the visible things, there's a whole invisible world of forces, of thoughts, of hopes, of despair, of desires, of wishes, of anguish, and all the countless multiple things which we are experiencing all the time, but we are not aware. Why we are not aware? Because we are lost in the outer play. Now, this is one thing which is one of the first steps in yoga, is to step back and see what's happening inside us, not what's happening outside us. Because this inside us is going to decide what's going to happen tomorrow. It has such a big role to play. The mother would often, remind sadhaks and make them conscious when they would say, "Mother, I am afraid this may happen." And she would say that, look, your fear is going to attract something which and later on you say, look, I was afraid of it. There is a nice joke among the doctor circles that's, hypochondriasis is people who imagine a disease. It's not a good term. So they imagine I have this disease, that disease, and this disease and that disease. So after a while, doctors label, oh, he's a hypochondriac. So they don't, see him thoroughly, and after a while the word goes around, oh, he's a hypochondriac. This goes on. Let's say somebody at 25, 30, has a state of hypochondriasis. Now at 80, 85, when he actually has, he's likely to have, let's say, a massive heart attack. And people say he's a hypochondriac. So there is a epitaph that a hypochondriac made for himself and said, please put it outside my grave. And the epitaph said that, look, didn't I tell you so, that I have a problem? Now you see this, I have a problem, okay, there is a problem at some level, but how much we are contributing to these events, to these, what is going to happen tomorrow. And you see, you can learn, if we are observant, we will see this everywhere. I was just traveling, even this time, and I was thinking, look, I was traveling by British Airways, and I was thinking it's not even 70 years that India was under the subjection to the British rule for hundreds of years. And if you look at it in one level, it's like India was looted. It's literally an organized robbery, to say the least. But I was wondering that as Indians, we don't feel any kind of, hate or any kind of, you are the people who, which is very good. It's beautiful that we don't feel like that. It's something amazing. For a nation to rise up without that feeling, which often people would nurture as a subject nation, that look, we have, it's, there was not even this sense that we are, we have been suffered, we have been persecuted, we have been suffering because of these guys. It's something amazing. It speaks volumes about the states of consciousness. Maybe somebody else would have lived for centuries, and there are human groupings like that, which play the role of being a persecuted one and, go around doing all kinds of things. That I am the victim. So we don't have that victim mentality, and it was something beautiful. And it connected me, this little experience I was having in the flight, it connected me to something which Sri Aurobindo wrote in his Bangla writings. It's in Dharma and Bande Mataram during the revolutionary movement, in the thick of that freedom movement. He says, while we have to make sure that we regain our independence, political freedom, it's necessary. And he was the one person who spoke in no uncertain terms about it. He says, yet we should be careful not to have any kind of hatred, anger, or sense of animosity against the British. It was amazing, that writing, that how you are clear on your objective, but you are keeping the inner state clean. It's the secret of Karma Yoga, because if you don't keep the inner state clean, you achieve an objective, but this is going to now create an event tomorrow. And when I look at it, the whole cycle of karma, how it turns back, just to complete this whole reflection that came to me, then look what has happened now. India has not turned back. We are friends with British. I mean, if you look at it that way, politically and otherwise, we are friends. But look what's happening in Great Britain. I mean, it's a churning, it's a breaking, it's like the whole isolation, economy, everything is getting affected as if something is, begun to go downhill. It's very strange. So what is going to take place much later is being formed inside us. That's why it's so important to be conscious of what's happening inside than what's happening outside. Sometimes too much exposure to, these news and events can have a very, it triggers a chain of thoughts and feelings which is not very healthy. Again, another example of Sri Aurobindo in 1914, 15, 16, when the world is caught up in the grip of the most violent Asuric and vital forces. Look how Sri Aurobindo saw this event. If you read through the causes of World War, the causes are given as 4 main causes, imperialism, militarism, then, economic differences, etc. Sri Aurobindo saw it as the stooping down upon earth of the vital forces. Why? Because a new creation was going to come. Now it's a very different vision, far avenues of the beyond. He was as if watching over at that time that there is a new creation which is going to come. It's unimaginable. I mean, after 100 years we can say yes, things have happened, things have changed, the world has changed. But how in 1914, 1915, 1916, 17, when the world was caught in the grip of the double Asura, on one side we had the great war going on the other side a massive flu epidemic in which more people were killed incidentally than the war. Many other kinds of isms, from superstitions to imperialism to the giant of communism which was swallowing earth in its own way. At that point of time, what is the news that Sri Aurobindo is bringing to humanity? A new creation is round the corner. That's how we should be able to look at things. At one place he says, wherever thou seest a great destruction, be sure of a great beginning. And then he goes one step further. The greater the destruction, the greater the possibilities of the new creation. When all is demolished, then everything is ready for something completely new. Now it may sound like a great philosophy, but it has tremendous importance in yogic practice in everyday life. One of the big challenges I find with people who are reading Sri Aurobindo, and they often say we don't understand. It's not about not understanding, but because there are so many structures within our mind, so many philosophies, so many opinions, viewpoints. So when we read Sri Aurobindo, we see from that lens. I met people, who read traditional Vedanta, and so they come and say, which school of Vedanta does he belong to? I said, no school. Sri Aurobindo is out of school. He has graduated, done his master's and PhD and out. So he doesn't belong to any school. Now people want to fit him into a slot. Oh, is this Visishta Advaita? I said, call it whatever. People ask these questions to Sri Aurobindo also, incidentally. You may put it in whichever block you want to, that's your limitation. It's not Sri Aurobindo's limitation. Because the mind is constantly comparing, contrasting, and free the mind of these structures and you see something very beautiful emerging. See it in the light of the quest of aspiration. What do I want? I don't want a philosophy of Vedanta and big lecture on that. That's not my necessity. My necessity or my aspiration is how this earth can become beautiful, as simple as that. How my life can become beautiful, to say the least. Now, can my life become beautiful with all the various theories and systems? What is the essence of it all? If we go back to all these various schools and systems of philosophy, the essence, which is the beautiful thing ever uttered, and for which, hats off to all these great rishis within India, that man, your essential nature is divine. Now, there cannot be a more profound truth. Oh, if that's my truth, then there is hope for me. There is hope for everybody. It's not that man, your essential nature is evil and the divine is somewhere out there. This is our conception. You are divine. It's a very powerful, rest is really not important. If that is the case, then it's possible for me to live this truth, which is my truth, which is everybody's truth, which is the world's truth. This world is God fulfilled in its outwardness. All the time this truth is trying to express itself through countless ways. And all that we can do is, which is in our hands, is, to an extent, I can either facilitate its emergence or I can block its emergence, I can delay its emergence, I can shorten the process, I can make it more painful, I can make it beautiful, I can make it smooth to an extent, as I said, or I can make it full of obstacles. That's all I can do. But this secret truth is bound to prevail. Now, the moment we understand it, then the whole thing about Sri Aurobindo speaking of divinizing humanity, it all becomes clear. It's natural. It's the most inevitable thing. If there is the divine present in creation, as all the great scriptures affirm, at least the Indic scriptures, whether it be Hinduism or Sikhism, two main streams, then it affirms that there is the divine who is fundamentally present in creation. If the divine is present in creation, then what is the ultimate niyati of creation, destiny? It is to become divine, because what is at the core is bound to express itself. So then we look at the process of yoga as very natural. What does desire do? It prevents from that free emergence. Why? Because, very simple, which mothers would know very well, that when they are cooking a nice dish, they don't like if the child, they don't mind, but if the child keeps coming and saying, Mama, can you pour a little more salt into it? I think it's a little less. Mama, can you make it this way? I saw on the TV a program. What will the mama say after a while? Tu jaake khel. है ना? मैं कर रही हूँ. Of course, children don't much interfere, but that's what you would say. That's the most logical thing, that, trust in me, I am going to do it. I love you more than you love the food. So I am going to prepare a nice dish for you. Well, you wait and just trust what I am doing for you and receive it as prasad. Now, this is exactly what the yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the mother is. If you look at it that way, trust the divine mother. She is preparing a nice dish for us. Actually, it may sound very strange, but actually there is a prayer of the mother. She speaks of this prayer in a conversation with the disciple. And this prayer is incidentally somewhere around 1919, 1920, about 100 years back, just before her return from Japan to India. So she writes of this prayer as, O Lord, the meal that I had prepared for thee. Since man refused the meal that I had prepared for you, I offered it back to thee. Because man refused. She has prepared a nice meal. What is this meal? This is a meal of new creation. And what is needed from our side? Very simple. Mother says at one place, a lot of problems of human beings will be solved if they understood that the divine is at least a little more wiser than them. Lots of problems. We want to solve all the problems of creation, Man, still a child in nature's mighty hands, in the succession of the moment lives. To a changing present is his narrow right. He sees imagined garments, not a face. His memory stares back at a phantom past. The future flees before him as he walks. This, Savitri, our present state. Yet we want to decide everything. We want to organize life, change it. And how we want to do it? In our own mental ways, which are very limited. But if we could hand it over to the divine, say, look, I don't understand. And it's logical, because in our present state, of course, it could be said that in our highest state, we are the authors of creation. But in our present ignorant state, we didn't create human nature. And how will we find the key to change it? It's simple logic. It doesn't require any, deep thinking to understand this. We didn't create nature. And within it, a wisdom is working. So how can we change it? By referring it back to the source, the one from which it has come. So it's very logical, he says, open to the mother, learn to trust upon her, and she will do the change. She's cooking a lovely dish, learn to receive it like a gift of grace. Sometimes the dish is not very tasty, and the mothers have their own logic. Why did I make this? So this is, when we look at life that way, things begin to change. So this is the second layer where we can help in the emergence of this reality into the situation and circumstances, or we can hinder it. The whole yoga is about it. But this is bound to emerge. If we don't allow, if we create obstacles for a long time, it will crash through. And when it crashes through, it can be disaster. This is the whole story of Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad. There is a reality hidden inside matter. And Prahlad says it is there. And he says, no, I am the reality, my ego. So there is a fight, and ultimately he says, iske andar hai, he breaks open, and what emerges is a disaster to the world at that point of time. Of course, Hiranyakashipu dies, but also, the whole world is threatened. Even the gods in the heavens, they begin to shake, because it's a reality which has emerged when man is not ready to receive. Even the gods are not ready. That's why the urgency of becoming ready. I feel more and more we are living in an age when we are not left to our own resources alone. It's a tremendous grace. But there is a pressing need to become ready for this new force, this new consciousness which is active. Now, there is a third deeper layer at which events are formed, of which we are most of the time not conscious. But that's where we have a real role to play. And that is the aspiration of our soul. What do we really aspire for? What we aspire for will manifest. If not today, then tomorrow. Aspiration is very different from thought. Though it can take the form of thought. It can exist independent of thought. Now, if I aspire for a beautiful world, for a beautiful tomorrow, even if it's very small, little spot of light, maybe just a dot, it has its importance. When people sometimes, to show the insignificance of man, which is also important at one level, you have that Carl Sagan's universe, in which he says, this is a little planet, little dot over which we live, and we fight, and we do this, and we do that. It's good to see that. It's a sobering effect, because it makes us understand the humility that, look, But look at it from another perspective. In this whole mass of darkness with little dots of light, on this little dot which we call as planet Earth, there are little tiny, seemingly insignificant human beings whose quest has taken the form of conquering the universe. It's not a joke. It's a great event. Little dot, but there are human beings who aspire and achieve. Already, we talk about space travel and going beyond. So, we should not, both things exist simultaneously. If I aspire today, however insignificant it may be, however small it may appear, it has a tremendous role, because it's going to have an impact tomorrow. And that's what I like beautiful about, one of the things, that when this world is all around, there is war and chaos and strife. Can we imagine First World War? Many of us become cynics, despair with, what to do, this what is happening, this is the present president, or this is the present, government. In India, of course, we have a rising sun. But it's not on that we need to have a hope. If we have hope from people and governments, then it will be misplaced, because these things change. That is an instrument. The real hope is on the fact that there is divine within creation, and he is emerging. That's what Sri Aurobindo in 1914, he writes in the Arya. He started with that 21st June as the Yoga Day, and how he has seen and foreseen and worked out everything for this great emergence. So these are the three levels at which any events take place. What we see on the surface is the result of the past momentum, which carries on for a long time. It's like I was, every time, you can learn all the time. So, though I had a good night's sleep, I said 1 hour I'll just take rest. It was, I think, 12 noon. And I was sure, like half an hour, 45 minutes, I'll get up like I do normally my afternoon siesta. But I'm feeling as if, suddenly a load of drowsiness has come in, and I'm accustomed to this, but still. So I open the watch and see the time is 1:46. So I said, look how habit has a hold upon us. So I have to wake up. My inner being wants to wake up and be fully active. But out of habit, So many events and circumstances are nothing but by the force of past habit. Because it's still tuned to India time. It's midnight. My body wants sleep, not because it needs sleep. It has slept well, thanks to lovely. But there is an artificial want simply because of habit. Many things which we call today as wants and needs are neither needs nor wants. It's just habit. See, these small little things make us learn so much. So what do? I can either succumb under the habit. Okay, it's okay. Let me, sleep another hour. Or my inner being takes the fight. No, I have to wake up. So there is a tussle between the mind and the body. Well, the mind ultimately, you wake up. Now this is the two levels at which. So there are events which are nothing but past habit. Because, there have been tendencies which have gone into the world play, commercialism, hatred, greed. So they have an impact upon the events and they are manifesting. But also, we can begin to change it. Our internal structure, our thoughts, feelings, hopes. And now they are going to form the future. So it's so important that what I am going to do today is going to form an event tomorrow. Well, that tomorrow will be, I don't know, but it's bound to have an impact. That's how it operates. And deep within, the deepest level, is the soul's aspiration. So very often, people, I have seen so many movements and so many, people come with questions and all kinds of things. And, they have done some practice here and there and nothing new. See, very often the old is sold as new. New method of pranayam. Pranayam is as old as man. It didn't need a teacher to teach pranayam. Human beings learned that by controlling your breath, mastering your breath, you actually have more power. I am sure it like very first humans would have learnt it. Animals know it, incidentally. They know that if I stay still, I'll become a powerhouse of energy the next moment. You don't need to spend $1,000 to have a course to understand this simple thing, Of course, it's the other person will have a good empire. It's a different thing altogether. But it's as simple as that. It just needs a little bit of introspection and common sense to see, observe yourself, and you'll see when we are angry what happens to the breath, and when we are quiet what happens to the breath. That's all that is required. And also to see when we are in higher states of consciousness, what happens to the breath. There is a spontaneous pranayam. And what happens when we are in lower states of consciousness, even though we may be meditating, seemingly meditating. How chaotic the breath and heartbeat can run. It just requires it. It doesn't need any big 7-day course to do that. But there is something else which we can, and that is the new thing that can be participate, which is what I feel is the exceptional privilege. And that's where I would like to close with this event which you were referring to, because yesterday we were having a discussion, and this year we are having the 50th anniversary of an event which took place on 1st January 1969. Anyone aware of that event? It was one of the things that Jugalda, who is, who was a very well-known name in Sri Aurobindo ashram. So when I had just joined the ashram, he told me, do you remember what took place on 1st January 1969? So I told him, remember not in the sense, but have you read? He was very happy. That was his way of knowing whether this fellow is has read or not. He was very happy. One of the first things, I had just joined the nursing home, he says, oh, I'm so happy that you are aware of it. What happened on 1st January 1969, Mother speaks of it as the descent of the Superman consciousness. So, between man and the supramental being, there is a big, big gap. Almost an unimaginable gap. Because we know our present state. Even to conceive of the supramental being is like for human beings conceiving, an impossibility. But the Superman is within the reach. He is the intermediary between man and the supramental being. In one sentence, Superman is a being with a transformed inner consciousness, but with the body still animal. So more and more we are going to see these children who are going to emerge, who will have more and more of this new consciousness, which is the Superman consciousness, which is already round the corner, which is already taking more and more human beings in its fold, who will find ways and means for the transmutation of the body. This is how Sri Aurobindo has said. Now, what is this consciousness? What are some characteristics? One of the characteristics of this consciousness, and it will answer many of the questions that mothers have. What's happening to today's children? Why do they all sleep late and wake up late? It's happening, by the way, universally. So, more or less, so why don't they listen to elders? As if you are worth listening, that's a different question altogether. Why do they just want to do things on their own, You see, what is happening is now the locus of action used to be outside in a certain generation, which means that we decided the choice of our action based on something external to us. Maybe parents, maybe society, maybe a religious scripture, maybe a book, but the authority was outside. But the true thing starts when the locus is inside. Meaning thereby, I choose and I decide. Now this is understandable when the shift takes place. There is going to be a chaos. We are so used to listening to somebody and acting. The problem with that, I am not responsible for what I do. I remember, when people used to debate about, then love marriages had just started. It was looked down upon, So love marriages versus arranged marriages. So there was a very interesting logic which both sides gave. You can use that same logic either ways. So one of the person says, I would prefer an arranged marriage. Why? If something goes wrong, I can blame my parents. The same logic can be used the other way. I would prefer love marriage because if something goes wrong, I am the one who has to work it out. It's not, I can't blame it on somebody. So people try to work it out because, they are responsible for what they have done. Now, it's true that on one side we think is a more secure life. But secure life is also a life which is unprogressive. A life which is stuck in its comfort zones. It's known, most people, why it happens, except for a few. The flame that we see in youth, it begins to come down after a certain age, Very strange. After 30, 35, all those questions, the quest, that aspiration, you're in a very comfort zone of your life. Precisely because you're in comfort zone. So comfort zones are not always good. So now children are beginning to make their own choices. Right or wrong, they have to go through this passage. If humanity has to awaken to a deeper self, they have to go through a phase. When they make their choices, make the wrong choices, then eventually discover the true law of their being. So the mother explains very beautifully, the Superman is someone who will discover his own ethical standard from within. Meaning he is not going to act according to fixed notions of what is right and wrong from an external point of view. What may appear wrong? Our idea of right and wrong is based on barbad ho jayega, kya fayda hoga, dukhi hoga. I don't care about it. I still must live my own life, That's the famous dialogue in one of the movies that I know, Papa, I am not the child that you would have wanted me to be. But I must say that I am the child that I wanted myself to be. It's a very powerful statement. And maybe if you know who I am, you will love me because I am what I have wanted myself to be. Now this is a new trend which has started. This is going to grow more and more. It has already spun out of control. Because the Superman is bound to have his locus of control within himself. He will discover his own ethical standards, which are not going to be the same as of the world we are leaving behind. So on one side, the measures are going to fall away. On the other side, children will become more and more inwardly committed and responsible rather than committed and responsible because of the pressures of the society around them. So this is one of the changes in a Superman. Second thing she says is it's a vast consciousness. It doesn't live in for limited gains, for small little benefits. It's a vast consciousness. He describes it as luminous and smiling and compassionate and benevolent. This state of compassion which I see in many people who are coming up, that's why your movements now like animals and all these activists have come up. It's a good thing. This is how compassion develops. We read about all these things and still we are very careless when we deal with other human beings. We want manners, but manners are all show. पाँव लगता हूँ लेकिन अंदर में है कि what a horrible person. Manners are deceptive things. It is what is important is inwardly what's happening. So this is the direction that humanity is going to take because of the emergence of this Superman consciousness, which is very vast, which is benevolent, which is not going to live in fixed boundaries or zones of systems, philosophies, beliefs and religions. All this is bound to go away because this is something new, unprecedented. It's not a belief system, it's a way of being. She says that very clearly. It's not a new faith in that sense, that there is a new gospel and a new belief system, a new religion. Mother says a new religion will not only be useless but harmful because religion is a boundary and humanity will break free. The religion was necessary at a stage of evolution. It was like a little pot in which you put a sapling. But a time comes when the pot must break and the sapling has to be transplanted in the wide open space. So all this is happening simultaneously because of the descent of the Superman consciousness. And this was necessary because, otherwise there will be a big gap. Swami Vivekananda did say time will come when every human being will have his own religion. Dharma. Now, own religion not in the sense of a formal religion. Every human being will have his own path because path is everywhere. Path is not in a textbook. Classical methods of yoga, karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, dhyana yoga, you have Raj yoga. It is still a limited thing. We don't find that in Mother and Sri Aurobindo. Everyday event of life for a seeker is yoga. Either a way to unite with the true self or a way to get disconnected. Why should there be a way and a method which is limited in both its scope as well as in practice? Everything can become a path because the master is everywhere and the path is everywhere. Let me close with a little event, very interesting experience of the mother, which is described as part of the conversations which has come in volume 11, Notes on the Way, but it's not there in Notes on the Way. It's part of the larger conversation where mother, many of the great paths, yogis, she had experienced all this. It's there in Prayers and Meditation, where she experiences successively each of the realizations. It is described in a simple prayer of the mother, that thou hast made me taste all the past realizations. But once he has the experience of all these great masters and realized beings opening a window and showing her that come see my path, and she sees and says it's all right, but it's a very small, narrow little window. So she appreciates, but like this not it. It's still a narrow path. Then there is a man sitting in purple robes and he tells her, why don't you taste my dish? So she goes there and tastes the dish. She says, wow, this is really delicious. Now here tasting the dish is not just the dish in that sense. It's like I am offering my consciousness. You taste it. So she says, this is delicious. So then she asked him, what is your path? And he says, I have no path. The mother puts it in one of her conversations in this way. She says, if you have the quest and the aspiration, even the extravagances of the American youth are a path. So let me stop with this little background, or maybe a big background. You want to have questions now, or you want to have a break, or whatever way you want? We can have a couple of questions now, and then we can have yes.